when people are first starting a practice, because NLP is all people that are kind of starting and growing a practice, what are maybe common mistakes that you see people make, and what are also maybe areas that can speed up their growth as they're starting a practice?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes, I'm going to shut my door because somebody just walked in the house. Hold on.
And those of you that just joined us, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in the chat, or you can raise your hand and kind of talk directly with Kelly when we'll have a lot of Q&A time for you to ask her follow-up questions and things like that. Or if you're not trying to do that in the chat, you can just put, I have a question, and then I'll call on you and unmute you. So go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest issues is management of time. First of all, I was doing a boot camp interview with a woman a few weeks ago, and she was like, you know, I'm a little scared to commit to boot camp because it's like having an affair, like having your business. You kind of like, it's very seductive. You think about it all the time, but then once you get committed to it, it's not as seductive anymore. So I think there is this aspect of how we manage our time and treat our time with the business, and we sometimes can let it overwhelm us instead of, I think of building a business as a long game. I don't think all the growth needs to happen right now. I like to build something that I can prove that I can repeat year after year and that I can grow over time. You will have those years that are really huge, especially in the beginning. You start out, you go from 0 to 100% growth, you know, but over time you want to be able to kind of be steady and consistent. So managing the time and how much you give to that relationship of you and your business, I think people tend to delve so much in, they lose themselves, and then they come to me trying to backtrack and say, crap, my life is not doing as well. I'm exhausted. Yes, I'm making money, but it's costing me these other things. So kind of having a more holistic growth perspective and considering, okay, what does my life need to look like? What does this business get of me? Is it going to be this seductive affair, or is it going to be integrated into my life? I think is one thing.
And do you think people kind of take on the wrong clients, or like do that because they're scared of like, am I ever going to get more clients? Or like, because I see that too, where people, they're working nights and weekends, and then it's like,
because they have to.
Because they have to, yeah.
Right.
Like, what does that come from, and how do you push back on that mindset?
Well, I would say that, yeah, I think we settle out of fear, and like, if I just get started, then I can get better. But what happens is it grows and grows, and then it gets out of control, and then you still have to deal with those fears later. You're either going to deal with them now, or you're going to deal with them later when you come to a coach who says, hey, your fee's too low and you're seeing the wrong amount of clients and you're seeing, you know, not the right fit. You're going to have to deal with it sooner or later. So I say, if you're going to start a business, do it well from the beginning. You're going to mitigate a lot of those issues ahead of time. So kind of confronting, where does that story come from? So there is a voice in your head that is not a part of you. It's either a mentor, a teacher, a parent, somebody who's telling you you have to. Because this is your business. You don't have to do anything. You get to do exactly what you want. I've seen people see only children, daytime hour clients only. I've seen people do couples, daytime hours only. I've seen people only work weekends because that's all they want to do. And they like their weekdays free with their family and homeschooling and all of that. So I think it kind of comes down to, this is your business. If you're going to spend all this time and energy on it, make it good from the beginning. Because sometimes people will tell me, I just got off a consult call, I'm going to do something at a little lower fee just to give myself confidence. And I'm like, you don't have time for that. We need to do something great from the beginning because you're going to be confident and poor. And we need you to have income so that you have energy, so that you are sustaining your life. You know, it's not about robbing people. But again, this is about the money aspect, which I would say is the other thing people ignore, is the financial side.
And how do they ignore that?
They set their fee from thin air, like comparison, or from what they think they can charge, instead of really looking at what do they need to charge in order to have retirement, savings, cash flow, pay for their taxes, all of those kinds of things. And so I think people aren't really looking at doing some research of the costs for getting started, looking at if I am going to panel, what does that mean to the cost to me? Because there is going to be a billing expense. And so usually if you take insurance, depending on where you live, you're going to have to see more clients, but that may be okay if you're going to go into a group situation, but you have to do the numbers and kind of understand what this means. Sure, in the short term, you may get clients quickly, but then long term, you're going to be working way more for less.
So I like how you said, and I often will tell people this too, like define your life and your lifestyle first, and then figure out how your business fits into that. And so, for example, you would say someone might want to look at their family budget and say, so at minimum, if I'm going to be doing this full time, I got to take home, say, $40,000.
Right.
And then they look at their rent, they look at, their cost for their website, they look for retirement, health insurance if they need to, and then how much taxes. And so they estimate, so maybe it's like $80,000. Then they break that down. How many weeks do I want to work per year? How many sessions per week?
Yeah.
That's where your hourly is versus, I should do $60 an hour.
So if I charge $60 an hour, I need to see 30 clients to make X amount so that I can pay my rent. Yeah. And then after rent, maybe I'll have enough for mortgage. So yes, it is the reverse. And so what I like to think of too is, that financial marrying of personal and business. And I say there's steps, right? Like, first of all, as humans, I find we have a hard time finding what our enough is, right? Because if I were to ask somebody, how much do you want to make? They're like, I'll make however much I can. I think you need to look at like, okay, what do I need to be able to know that I'm doing well and I'm contributing to my family, whatever that looks like. I'm the sole provider for my family. Joe is as well. That looks different than when you have a partner who's bringing in income. My partner is starting to, but I don't count it yet because it's a new business. So I just think of myself as that sole provider. I look at, okay, these are the non-negotiables of our life. Health insurance is non-negotiable, blah, blah, blah. These are the negotiables. The trip to Spain, kind of negotiable. The trip here, kind of negotiable. Often travel, eating out, those kinds of things. Well, for my first round of like my business, I need to make this at minimum, and then as it grows, I need to get to this point. So you can create steps and projections as you go. It's not like I have to make 200 grand this year, but you need to know where you're headed and what decisions you make now influence that future plan.
So Kelly, what do you see people do right? So I know you kind of hit on some of these traps people get into. Like when you see people that like first 6 months of starting a practice, like they're killing it, it's going well, they're growing quickly, how they want to grow. Like what are some of the things that they did right that are sort of those just like building blocks of the first, say, 6 to 12 months of starting a practice?
They leveraged the relationships they already had. They weren't afraid to tell friends and family like what they're doing. I don't know how many times I've told family and they still don't know what I do. But
oh my gosh.
I think,
my friend strove and was like, you help people do counseling private practices? Like, will you help me start? I'm like, do you understand what I do?
So I think really they told their doctor. My biggest referral resource in my practice was my primary care.
Me too.
Every time I was in there, she was also a DO, so she would do adjustments and things, and we'd be talking, and I'd ask her, how's your business going? And I'd tell her like, hey, I have some clients, and before I knew it, like just building that relationship and not being afraid to say, hey, I need a great person are there patients you don't want to see? Because as I get clients, I want to be able to refer them to quality doctors and that sort of thing. And I'm really wanting to focus my practice on anxiety, or I work with eating disorders or whatever. Would you want those referrals if ever I get a contact? And I'll leave my card up front if you ever need to consult. I'm here. Like I'm here as a resource, So I think people who use those relationships do really well. Also, the people who do great are the ones that are really clear about what makes them unique and who they love helping. And the thing about being a therapist is you are good at empathizing. That is like your number one trait. And that's all marketing is that when you connect to the pain and you can speak to the transformation, that's why therapists are actually really great marketers. So if you can get clear and not general, I think you do really well. I think that can shift with a group practice, but even in that, like, I still like to see something unique about a group practice, like what makes them different.
Kelly, when do you think people should consider adding clinicians to their practice? Because you and I had a little scuffle there at the beginning.
I mean, because I work with employees, I actually I do have a formula for it, and it's based on like conversion. So you should be tracking your calls, even now, you guys, how many calls you get, how many of them convert into clients, and then you should be tracking average length of treatment with you. You want to know this because you want to be tracking your outcomes too. You want to see, like, are people falling off at a certain point in care? You know, what's happening. It will help you kind of understand the best way you work. I come from a psychoanalytic, dynamic kind of background. So treatment in that span, the way I was taught and the way I love to work is very long-term. Other people hate that, you know, so really trying to kind of understand how many clients do you need in order to keep your practice full depends on those factors. How many calls convert, how long do people average stay with you, then you can kind of hit some goals with that. Now, when you add another clinician, then you know, okay, conversion is going to be a little less because you've always kind of promoted yourself. And so it's going to take some time to move people over to another clinician. But you can see, like, once the call volume gets up to a certain point, you know, you can convert that amount, then you know what it would take to fill up that clinician. That's me being, I'm a very, Joe will tell you, I'm very slow to scale. Joe will scale and, like, the ground will come up beneath it, whatever you expect. You expect it to just tap, you know what I mean? You're like,
it's not like a Game of Thrones reference or something.
I don't know what to say, but like you said, like, you build it, they'll come. I've seen that happen, yes, sometimes, but then sometimes people grow so fast, they're like, oh, I'm getting calls, but they're not really, they don't have processes in place. I think there's things you can do now if you want to do group, like start thinking about, like, what's the intake process? How do I handle my calls and document it?
Do I handle my calls, or do I have someone else handle the calls?
Right. So if you're currently doing that yourself, document your process so that when you hire somebody, you already have a training manual for them. Think in terms of growth always. Even think bigger than you are. Oh yes, this came from my mastermind that I was in recently. We were all talking and we're like, we need to think bigger than we are. Think of yourself as a group practice already. Is it documented? Is it scalable? Can somebody else do this? Because you carry so much in your head on your own, you guys. You have all this knowledge. And when it comes time to hire someone to help you, you're going to have to be like, okay, what do I know? And then, but if you do it as you go, it's going to be a lot easier, and it's going to make that growth easier. And I'm not saying like it's always numbers. I agree with Joe that there's sometimes an intuition to this. There is an art to business. There is a play that happens of, like, I did hire somebody once and I was like, if I don't hire somebody, I will never let go of these tasks. So I told her, I said, I'm going to pay you whether or not I give you work. And it forced me to, like, move my work over to her. You know, so knowing yourself is a big part of running this business, whatever it is. If it's just going to be you or it's going to be a group, knowing who you are and what you need in order to move forward is really important. Joe can take, like, I admire, like, some of the risks that he takes that I would be like, let me think about it. Let me plan about that. Let me get the numbers on it. Like, we all have our ways of doing it. But at the end of the day, like, you're creating something. And if it makes you miserable, you created that misery, undo it. You know, you can change it anytime. Like, you can say that you can do this group and be like, forget this. Okay, pivot. No big deal.